Hello and welcome to First Page Sundays. I'm your host, author Tom Leveen, and with me as ever, or at least sometimes, is the beautiful and intelligent Joy, who will be joining us in theory in a moment. We had this whole thing planned out and ready to go, and yet, just like that, everything changes, so we rely upon our theater kid improvisational skills to jump right in and start anyway. Hello and welcome once again to First Page Sundays. Here we go. This is the first page of Party by Tom Leveen, original copyright 2010. I'm the girl nobody knows until she commits suicide. Then suddenly everyone had a class with her. You know the one I mean. You don't pick on her because you don't know she's there, not really. She sits behind you in chemistry or across the room in Spanish. You've seen her naked in the locker room after physical education, contradiction in terms if ever there was one. But you don't know what color her eyes are, what her name is, what grade she's in. She's always been there, like the gum under your desk in math class, and when you do bother to explore under there with your fingers, the first thing you do upon contact is to jerk back and say, ew! And when that girl leaves, it doesn't matter. There's always one ready to take her place. Now, I cheated and turned the page only because it didn't end on a period, so I just read the end of the section. That is Party. Beckett originally was like chapter 5 or 6, and my agent at the time was like, wait, let's make this chapter 1. And I thought she was a complete idiot until I cut and pasted the chapter in and then reread the book from there. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh my God, you're a genius, absolutely. And I, honest to God, I don't think the book would have been published had I not made that change. Opening with Beckett was absolutely the right thing to do, yeah. I think one of the things, having talked to people about this over the years, is that she, and that line in particular, speaks to so many people, because I feel like we've all felt that way. It's a statement about, like, it's that perennial high school question. It's like, do you even know I'm here? Do you have any idea? And something I've learned after meeting so many high school students over the years, doing school visits and whatnot, is that you can't predict which kids feel that way, because you could take the valedictorian, captain of the football team, whatever traditional sort of quote unquote popular things you want, and think, well, they've got it together and they're riding on top of the world, and sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're asking this question, like, if I go away, do you care? Does it even make any impression if I'm not here anymore? Like, that's a real thing, and I get frustrated with any kid being dismissed. Of course, that's a big thing that we talk about a lot over here in Tom Leveen world, for various and sundry reasons. But like, I often feel as though adults in positions of authority, whether that's parents or teachers or what have you, feel as though they can pick out who the troubled kids are, and they can look at their skin color or how they dress or where they live or the kind of car they have or don't have, or if they're on the lunch program or whatever, and say, well, that's going to be one of those problem kids. And that is such horseshit, because those are not predictors, in my experience. Great opening line. I still have to, I don't often compliment myself, as Joy can tell you, but goddamn, that is a great line.
It really is.
It really is. So
really
that's
is.
a great start.
Brilliant.
Now, the thing about this that I want you writers and storytellers to take away, however, is that normally, if you're following me, if you're part of the Patreon group or you've been in any of my classes or whatever, we talk a lot about those first 5s, right? First 5 words, first 5 sentences, first 5 paragraphs, first 5 pages. Super important. I stand by that. I think that's very true. In fact, one of the things we're going to be talking about, as I've got 2 other pieces to read tonight, I found what I think, not a better opening sentence, but something to think about for this particular writer, that is going to be about landing that first punch right up front, so that we know where we are, we know where we're headed, all that kind of stuff. I think we talked about it last week with the Star Wars piece, where it's like, oh, okay, well, bam, we know where we are, we're set in our space and time, so that's great. This doesn't do that. So what's the deal with that, Tom? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, what's up with that, dude?
And so here's what I will tell you. The reason this works, and so this is speaking now in a more sort of professional bird's eye view, is the voice. Because if you've got a solid voice that you just immediately connect to, then you can draw that stuff out a little bit. You can afford to spend some time figuring out where we are and what's going on. A great voice will take you a long way. But there's something about the way this particular character speaks to us as the reader. They're like, oh, I'm in and I will follow you. So she's going to, it's like we've earned a few pages more. when you've got a strong voice, and then that's the difference. That's why I think we can step away from the first fives that we talk about so much in terms of plot and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we're going to jump into the first page of the... I wonder if I should say the title, though. This one actually has a title.
Yes.
Okay.
Say the title.
We're going to do the title. The title of the working title of this piece is The Pirate Kids. And it goes something like this. And we'll do my best. Right? Yes. The cabin was dark, and the captain was brooding. It had been 3 weeks, 3 long, boring, joyless weeks, without any chocolate to speak of. If Captain Joe, J-O, if Captain Joe, the pirate ship Athanasia, had any weakness to speak of, it was sweets. Chocolate was a particular favorite, not just of Captain Joe, but of the entire crew. She was starting to fear that if the next ship they plundered didn't have a supply of sweets, there would be an uprising. "We've still got syrup for the pancakes," Captain Joe murmured as she leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes and propping her feet on her desk. "That should last another month, and see us to port." Even still, there was a sugar shortage at sea, and she had a hard time thinking about just how hard it would be to keep order soon. Captain Joe had to figure out why, and what she could do about it. Her crew could be vicious when they didn't get their way. Even immortal children could give in to bouts of impatience. Or outright tantrums in some cases. Some of the crew had been on the ship for hundreds of years, but not one of them was over 12. It was no wonder the pirates loved their candy so much. With a wave of her hands, Captain Joe illuminated the cabin with soft magical light. "What we need is..." A grin grew upon her face, and she stood suddenly, crossing in 3 large steps and throwing open the cabin doors. In the corner, a rat was startled, squeaking and ducking from view, but Captain Joe paid it no mind. "Fedric! New orders!" The entire deck fell silent, every head turning in the direction of their captain, every hand falling idle. "Aye, Captain?" "Bring us some new wishes, now." "Aye, Captain!" Fedric began shouting orders of his own, and all the crew burst into cheers. And that is page 1 of The Pirate Kids. I think we're pretty clearly dealing with a middle grade or early YA, just by the title and the way it's treated, which I think is good. Any chance you get to rewrite a sentence that has the word was is generally a better, stronger sentence. And we have 2 of them in the first sentence, and so that's one of the first things that jumped out at me was the cabin was dark and the captain was brooding. And I'm like, gah! 2 wases in the first sentence? Come on! However, having said that, number 1, I would say there's got to be a better, smoother way to write that sentence. The captain brooded in the dark, or in the darkness of the some other way to get rid of those 2 wases. Having said that, I think for this particular genre, if it is more in that middle grade, early YA, I think we have a little bit more leeway, because it's still very conversational, and the voice is still consistent. So, and this is the thing, anything I ever tell you, whether it's here or on Patreon or any of our classes or anything like that, is not gospel. It's what I recommend. And I'm going to say, to go back to party, voice trumps everything. Absolutely everything. Yeah, so just something to think about. If you think you can rewrite this sentence and get rid of some of those wases, great. However, the voice is strong and clear. Again, there's that clarity thing, so I'm less aggravated about it. And frankly, I may be the only person who gets aggravated about the was thing. It might just be me. I just think it's a good idea. But the third sentence, the first paragraph, 3 long, boring, joyless weeks without any chocolate to speak of. Like, that lands for me.
That resonates.
Right. And I think it will resonate for a lot of readers.
Yes.
And if I don't think there's a way to put it in the first sentence, and I don't necessarily want you to, but it's a great way to end the first paragraph. Like, chocolate, done.
Yes.
Like, if I'm right about the middle grade, this... I'm assuming that the plot is going to have something to do with getting the chocolate. Maybe it doesn't, but number 1, what did you do? You introduced a conflict immediately. First paragraph, there's a problem. We don't have chocolate. Now, whether or not that's the plot for the whole book, I'm in, because now I got to know, are they going to get chocolate? And yet chocolate is not exactly saving the world. It's not a dragon. It's not the Hunger Games. It's not The Stand. It's chocolate. Everybody relax, okay? But in this world, it is a dragon. It is The Stand. It is the end of the world, right? And that's one of the things I love about it. The line, even immortal children can give in to bouts of impatience.
Right.
I want to point out, because you can't see it, is its own paragraph, which as a style choice I really like. That's exactly what I would have done, because let's call that out. Bam. Immortal, don't bury the lead. Don't bury it in a paragraph. Let it be its own thing, so we know instantly. And I'm going to guess based on that would easily fall on the first page in a published novel. So in fact, it might even be, if it were me as a designer, which I am not, but if I was, I would try to make that the last line on page 1. That's what you're going to turn the page to, if at all possible, because I think that line really lands well. Woo-hoo! Moving on to page 2, or our second entry, I should say. I do not see, there may have been a title. If there was, I don't have it with me at the moment, so we'll just have to go with it. But I think I know what genre it is. We'll have to see. And it goes something like this. Oh my God, don't turn off. Okay, everything's fine. Everybody calm down. Everything's fine.
Oh, Thomas.
Page 1. You should have told him, Elizabeth said abruptly, breaking into her heated thoughts. She quickly glanced around in surprise at speaking out loud. A well-dressed woman a few seats down on the train was looking at her from the corner of her eyes, her full lips twitching. Elizabeth gave one brief nod in the woman's direction and turned swiftly back to the window, mortified at having been overheard. You need to get a hold of yourself, she told herself sternly, this time in her head. They were still 2 hours from Cold City, Kansas. She figured that should be enough time to get herself together, she hoped. If only her hands would stop sweating in the meantime. To keep herself distracted, she focused on what brought her here in the first place. She had thought a lot about the past recently as the hours slowed on the train, debating if she made the right choice. She laid her head against the window pane, staring at the fast-moving countryside as her thoughts drifted. She had to come. She had no other choice. When she saw the advertisement in the paper for a mail-order bride for a man in Kansas, she thought it had to be fate directing her. Her entire life, it was always in someone else's hands, so why not fate this time? Elizabeth grew up in one of the lower-class neighborhoods in Boston with few family members and even fewer friends. Her father, Ronald Douglas, was always a stern man who never seemed to have time for her. Her mother died during childbirth, and it was something her father never forgave her for. Her childhood was cold and lonely, but she was grateful that she always had a roof over her head and food in her belly. She knew that many others did not have those luxuries. Then, 3 months ago, her father was struck down by a runaway carriage. He had been walking home from his job at a local law office. He suffered a broken neck and died instantly. The coroner assured Elizabeth that he did not feel anything, as that was her main concern. Thoughts of herself came after that. Technically, that is the end of the first page. There's another page here, but I'm going to stick with the first one. I'm believing, based on limited experience and exposure, I believe this is going to be an historical romance. That is my guess.
I liked the opening paragraph where she's talking out loud. Like, I really liked that first exchange. It just didn't lead me to think historical romance yet, but that's fine. Like, because by the end of the first page, we were definitely historical. So,
yes.
So I mean, like, that's fine. But I liked that first paragraph. I liked that she started off talking to herself out loud, where somebody else could hear her, and then was immediate. I mean, like, there was a lot of character stuff right there.
Yes,
which I loved.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
If you could find some way, and again, not that you should, but this is just what I would do as an editor. Is you open the book, Chapter 1. When she saw the advertisement in the paper for a mail-order bride for a man in Kansas, she thought it had to be fate directing her. Boom! Like, that is a cool opening sentence, in my opinion.
Yes.
Like, what a great way to start, like, oh, shit! Like, if it is historical romance, man, we know everything we need to know right there, and I'm going to read the next sentence, you know what I mean? I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm saying I would recommend it. Something I would look at as an editor, because that's just sets up the whole thing so beautifully, voice and everything. And doesn't have to be that exact sentence, but if you can land that mail order bride, that whole thing just in that first line, I think you're off to the races, and that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Some of the things I agree with because I didn't know what we were getting into either until we hit the carriage, and I was like, oh, carriage, with like horses, you mean, right? Okay, not one of these newfangled, But the good news is there's plenty of places to do that without completely throwing this out and starting from scratch, because I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah.
The third sentence is, a well-dressed woman a few seats down on the train Why is she well dressed? Remember we talked about this last week. Instead of well dressed, give me 1 or 2 specific details about her. And I don't know anything about whatever the time period is, because this, I mean, the horse and the train and carriage still covers a pretty big chunk of American history, right? So. Right. I don't know, how the fashions changed throughout all that kind of stuff and whatever. But if you could give me like a specific type of dress or headwear or something, like I don't know if this is a bustle type of thing. I barely know what a bustle is, frankly. But is that something?
You're just pulling that from watching Tombstone a couple of weeks ago.
You're not wearing a bustle.
Sorry.
If you haven't seen Tombstone, what the hell's the matter with you? Go watch Tombstone tonight when we're done. But because that's the thing, because I don't read this genre. Presumably the author reads this genre, and that's why they're choosing to write in it. I sure hope so. But yeah, so taking a phrase like well-dressed, which is so vague, and just give me one good, tight, specific thing about that, and that opens up the whole era for us, I think, right there.
Yeah.
But then, so we've got one line of dialogue, bam, you should have told him, and then the rest of it, and even into the second page that was sent, it's all telling. It's all background. It's all talking about what happened then, and there's not a lot of action. It's just her thinking about this stuff. Now, couple things about that. Number one, I think for this, if it is historical romance, it's probably okay, because what I have read tends to do that. Particularly in the first chapter, there is a lot of telling, get that background and all that kind of stuff, and then we're going to get into the story hardcore in chapter 2. Cool. So I'm going to allow for that as a genre convention. So take what I say with a grain of salt. Always do that. But it would be cool if instead of telling a lot of this, she, what happens if, and I don't know if the woman ends up being a part of the story. I'm going to guess she doesn't, because that's usually kind of what happens. But she could be right now. She could have a conversation right now and have this conversation with Elizabeth, and that could be a lot of fun. Your assignment, whether you ever end up doing it in the book or not, your assignment, author, is to put these two women in an inescapable situation, as we've talked about on Patreon, and make them talk to each other and see what happens. You don't have to keep anything that you write. It's just an exercise. It's just to, kick the tires a little bit and see what happens. But as a free writing exercise, I think you may discover a lot of things about Elizabeth that maybe you didn't know before. And you may discover something cool that you can do in the opening of the story that isn't just a recitation of what happened in the past. Again, genre convention, it's probably fine. Coming from the genres I write in, I would prefer to see more action happening there. And with characters who are at odds, which makes it, if you've read my dialogue book, and you should, that's a great place for dialogue, is when two characters are in conflict. So it's something to think about.
Yeah.
I don't know if Cold City, Kansas is a real place. I'm going to assume it is because it sounds like it. But whether it is or not, what a great name. What a great Cold City. Like, that just sounds like, where are you from? Tombstone. Like, oh, we're taking the train up to Cold City. Like that just nails, I think,
Let me find any other place to be going to.
Right? Exactly.
Other than Cold City.
Or Tombstone. Like Silver City. Oh, okay. There's a big silver boom. Yay! But no, Cold City. Nothing good happens in Cold City. So what a great, if this is historical romance, or if there's any romance at all, which presumably, what a great contrast. And you're setting up, this is something one of my agents taught me a long time ago, is using your environment to be a struggle, to be part of the conflict and obstacle. She told me that in Rebellion. To use the environment against the character. So if you don't already, in your revision or as you're writing it, think about ways that Cold City, Kansas can be an adversary to Elizabeth, and play with that a little bit. Now, she's from Boston, so the cold isn't going to do it. It can't just be, it's cold. Like, yeah, she's from Boston. She doesn't give a fuck about cold. I've been to Boston when it was cold. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. 0 degrees. That's not even a temperature.
I mean, technically.
You were there. You remember. Fucking cold. But is there a way that Cold City, Kansas, or the occupants of Cold City, Kansas, can be a struggle? Would be great.
The ethos, the place in its own development. Really, I mean, there's all.
What's the church going to say about this right now? Maybe they're going to be like, "Yay, marriage," or maybe they're going to be like, "Oh, one of those." I don't know. As always, may you be happy, may you be well, may you be safe, and may you be peaceful and at ease. Stay away from everybody. Wash your hands. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night.